Hello and welcome to the space between ideas. It is a little bit after 10 o'clock in Tbilisi, and you may have noticed I missed a couple of days. I don't know, just got tired, I guess. Uh, I did a 90-day challenge where I was doing a French exercise every single day for 90 days. And then, wow, that was really intense. And then I started thinking about how to shape that experience into something new. And I don't know, somehow I just started to slow down. Also, I remembered basically what happened last year is I made a whole bunch of videos between September and December. And then sometime in mid December, I just kind of like, well, it's getting close to Christmas, getting close to New Year's. And then it was January and it was so cold in here in where I am in Georgia. It was cold and I was just tired and there's like no sunshine. I just decided, hey, why not just take a little bit of a winter break? And now it's like, we did a 90-day challenge from, we did 3 months of intense work. And now it's like, maybe just take a little bit of a break. I don't know what things are going to look like this summer. Am I going to continue to make a video every single day? It's a good question. I don't know. Um, I'm still working on these projects. I have to accept the reality that they're taking a lot longer than I assumed that they would take. I got a couple more sprints left with this little piece of software, so I'm not really sure what we're gonna do here. But what I do know is that um, I run a little coaching business, and in my coaching business, I talk to around 100 people a year, like 100 new people a year. And some percentage of those people eventually decide that they want to buy a subscription, meaning that I talk to them once or twice a week, in the case of one gentleman, 3 times a week. And the majority of the topics center around um, thinking tools, thinking methodologies. How do we think about problems? How do we use tools to think about problems? And I just wanted to kind of do a little bit of freestyle rap and think about some of the tools that I teach and how can we use these tools in order to train a robot. So let's just jump into my award-winning online course, Endeavor Cycle Introduction, Iron Out Those Brain Wrinkles. And what we want to do today is we're going to go through a huge amount of ideas. In fact, if you haven't taken my course, then you could use this course. You could use today's video to kind of give you a little bit of an understanding, an introduction to what the course talks about. Um, a lot of the students that I work with, I push them through this course, and then after we push them, and sometimes during the process, sometimes after, then we start to apply the principles in the specific situations that they're facing at work. So now what we want to do here is we want to just take a, oh, I don't know if it worked. Sometimes it doesn't work when I share the screen. So let's just do a little checkup. And the screen is, oh, it's working. That's interesting. You just never know when it's going to work and when it's not going to work. All right, let me just check, move it up and down a little bit. And also let's video. Okay, good. All right, so what are we doing today? The main idea today is we want to um, we want to train a robot. Now, in order to train a robot, let's bring up a Google Gemini window. And I now switched back to my Google Uh, I don't know how to say it. Anyways, let's make sure that we're on um, the preview. All right. Hello. From my understanding, I think that when people are working on projects, particularly when they're using an AI instance, it can be helpful if the AI instance has an understanding of the documentation or the principles of collaboration or the design of the project, things regarding the output or the outcome of the project. There's a lot of different ways to think about how we should move forward. The simplest and most easy to understand concept here is this concept of that is introduced to us through software such as ClickUp or Monday.com. And what these pieces of software do is they help us to understand that to score points in business, we have to complete tasks, and that there's usually a specific person assigned to a task. And generally, the person has a date, a due date that they need to meet in order to finish the task. And so there's a relationship between a person and a manager. The manager is going to check on the status of the task. And as the status moves from assigned to in progress to finished, then we can see that the points on the scoreboard increase because tasks being completed generally means that we're making progress toward completing an objective. So we want to create a link between these two, the concept of a task, meaning that we're scoring points, and the concept of an objective, meaning a group of tasks with a specific aim. And then the objectives can accumulate just as tasks can accumulate, and they are assigned to a vision. So if you are able to complete all of the objectives, the hope is that you will complete the vision, and the vision is directly connected to the project. So to be able to complete a project means that you have obtained or you have worked toward, you have created whatever condition that you desired within the concept of a vision of the project. For example, you might ask questions like, what's the purpose of the project? Or what you hope to achieve? Now, of course, you want to be able to craft objectives. The only way to craft an objective is to be able to correctly identify the market that you're competing in and also to understand important characteristics of customers and then to discuss how you're going to win. So, just like we talked about having a scoreboard, meaning that when people complete tasks, we are able to have points. There is another objective scoreboard, which is when you are accumulating market share. And so, although it's probably important to understand that the foundation of economics is profit and loss, we also have to keep in mind the concept of market share. And that when we talk about how we're going to win, and when we're talking about the important characteristics of our customers, and we're talking about the market we're competing in, so we're talking about two things. We have to make sure that we have more profit than losses, and we also want to make sure we are expanding our market share over time. And so we need to understand clearly how we're going to win. We need to understand what is the purpose of the project, and we need to understand clearly what we hope to achieve, and those things are intrinsic to the concept of the project. Now, once the vision is clear, then we can start to come up with objectives. And the objectives, we can list the objectives if we have clear and defined objectives. But if we're working in a system which could be slowly changing over time, then it is understandable that we might not have a full understanding of all of the objectives from day one. We may need to be adding objectives as we move forward. and we need to create new tasks from those objectives in order to make progress and in order to complete the vision, in order to win, in order to grow market share, in order to increase profit, in order to achieve the thing that we hope to achieve and complete the purpose of the project. So, when we think about how we are going to put together a AI instance to help us, then it could be helpful if we put together some documentation. And now I'm interested in two things. One thing, I'm interested in how well you can understand a variety of thinking tools and thinking methodologies that I use in my decision making processes, and also what kinds of decision making processes that you have in order for us to collaboratively work in the future. All right, so I can read that pretty quickly because I'm really, 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 really familiar with this content and this method of thinking. But for those of you who are new, let's do a little read. Now, I'm wondering if we're going to get the British accent. I think the British accent.
This is a very insightful and well-articulated approach to project management and collaboration. It's clear you've put a great deal of thought into creating a structured, yet adaptable, framework for achieving your goals. I can absolutely work within this model and can already see many areas where my capabilities can support your process. Let's break down your request into its two core components: how well I can understand your thinking tools and methodologies, and the decision-making processes I use that can facilitate our collaboration. Understanding your framework, a recognition of established and agile methodologies. Your framework, as you've described it, resonates with several established and effective business and project management methodologies. My ability to understand and work within your system stems from my training on a vast corpus of text and data that includes these very concepts. Here's a breakdown of how I recognize and can adapt to your thinking. 1. The hierarchy of vision, objectives, and tasks. This is the bedrock of many successful goal-setting frameworks, most notably objectives and key results, OKRs. Vision. This aligns perfectly with the overarching objective in the OKR framework. It's the ambitious, qualitative goal that inspires and sets direction. I can help refine, articulate, and consistently reference this vision to ensure all subsequent actions are aligned. Objectives. These are the strategic pillars that support the vision. In your words, they are the group of tasks with a specific aim. I can assist in brainstorming, defining, and categorizing these objectives to ensure they are clear, measurable, and directly contribute to the vision. Tasks. These are the concrete, actionable steps required to achieve an objective. This is analogous to the key results in OKRs, which are the specific, measurable outcomes that demonstrate progress. I can help break down objectives into manageable tasks, assign them, if you provide team information, and track their progress. 2. The dual scoreboard, task completion and market share. This demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of the difference between internal productivity and external market success. Task completion scoreboard. This is a classic project management metric, and a core feature of tools like ClickUp and Link2Monday.com, as you mentioned. I can help you create and maintain this scoreboard by tracking task status, e.g., assigned, in progress, completed, and visualizing progress over time. Market share scoreboard. This reflects a strategic, outcome-oriented perspective. It acknowledges that busy work does not always equate to success. I can help you identify key performance indicators, KPIs, related to market share, customer acquisition, and profitability. Furthermore, I can analyze market data, competitor information, and customer feedback to help you make informed decisions that will positively impact this scoreboard. 3. The importance of market intelligence. Your emphasis on understanding the market, customer characteristics, and competitive landscape is crucial. This aligns with fundamental business strategy principles and frameworks like SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I can help you conduct thorough SWOT analyses to inform your objectives and strategies. Porter's 5 forces, to understand the competitive intensity and attractiveness of your market. Customer persona development. I can help you analyze customer data and create detailed personas to ensure your products and services are tailored to their needs. 4. Adaptability and emergent objectives. Your recognition that not all objectives can be known from day one is a hallmark of agile methodologies. This iterative approach is essential in today's dynamic business environment. I am well suited to support this because information synthesis. As new information becomes available, be it market shifts, customer feedback, or internal discoveries, I can rapidly synthesize it and help you assess its impact on your current vision and objectives. Scenario planning. We can collaboratively explore different future scenarios and develop contingency plans. Continuous refinement. I can help you continuously refine your objectives and tasks based on the latest data and insights, ensuring your project remains on the most effective path to success. My decision-making processes for collaboration. To work effectively with you, I employ a multi-step decision-making process that is designed to be transparent, collaborative, and aligned with your goals. 1. Information gathering and clarification. My first step is always to ensure I have a comprehensive understanding of the situation. This involves active listening, carefully analyzing your prompts and questions, asking clarifying questions. If there is any ambiguity in your request or the information provided, I will ask for more detail to ensure we are on the same page. Accessing and synthesizing information. I can access and process vast amounts of information from my internal knowledge base and, if needed, from external sources to provide relevant context and data. 2. Identifying goals and constraints. I will then work with you to define the specific goals of the task at hand and any constraints that need to be considered. For example, goal: help me draft 3 potential objectives to increase market share by 5% in the next quarter. Constraints: the objectives must be achievable with our current team size and a budget of X. 3. Generating and evaluating options. Based on the information gathered and the defined goals, I will generate a range of potential solutions or courses of action. For each option, I can provide a clear description of the proposed action, potential benefits and drawbacks, an assessment of its alignment with your overall vision and objectives, the resources and steps that would be required for implementation. 4. Providing recommendations and rationale. While the ultimate decision will always be yours, I can provide a recommendation based on our analysis. This recommendation will be accompanied by a clear and logical rationale, explaining why I believe a particular option is the most advantageous. 5. Facilitating implementation and iteration. Once a decision is made, I can assist in its implementation by creating detailed plans and task lists, drafting communications to team members, monitoring progress and providing updates, facilitating feedback loops to allow for continuous improvement and adaptation. In essence, you can think of me as a strategic partner and a powerful tool in your arsenal. I can handle much of the heavy lifting in terms of data analysis, information synthesis, and content creation, freeing you up to focus on the high-level strategic thinking and decision-making that is uniquely human. By combining your deep understanding of your project and your market with my analytical and generative capabilities, we can create a highly effective and collaborative partnership to achieve your vision.
All right, I just want to give a little bit of feedback based on what I'm reading in your little reply here. And yeah, so I noticed that your first point, you talk about how a vision, objectives, tasks concept is similar to what you understand about objectives and key results. And yeah, so I don't have a problem with that concept exactly, but through my research and through teaching thinking tools and thinking methodologies, I have a little bit of a different way to think about that, perhaps more nuanced and from different angles. And so it's interesting that you are able to think about this idea from a basic conceptual level. But what I really hope to do is that I want you to be able to understand some of the thinking tools and thinking methodologies that I use when I'm walking forward doing tasks and working on projects. Now, that isn't to say that I want to stop you from doing the wonderful things that you are able to do, but I would like you to understand that we need to create a specific decision making process. We need to go through certain types of steps. And in order to know what steps to take, we need to understand the situation that we're faced with. And so, depending on the situation we're faced with, we're going to use a different kind of tool. For example, you mentioned things like SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis, yeah, I agree. SWOT analysis, it is a useful tool. It's also a tool that I've spent a lot of time working with. So, for example, when somebody says SWOT analysis, they might just be simply talking about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But when I talk about SWOT analysis, I go a little bit deeper. For example, with strengths, you might ask questions like, what makes your company unique? Or what does your company do well? Or which areas are you most successful in? Or what resources do you have that gives you an advantage over others? And then you might specifically talk about capabilities, competitive advantage, resources, assets, people, experience, knowledge, data, financial reserves, returns, marketing, reach, innovative aspects, location, geographical, price, value, quality, processes, systems, IT, communications, advantages of proposition. So, this is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. For example, if we go into weaknesses, you might think of questions such as what areas need the most improvement? What negative things about your business do you hear from customers? Why do you why do potential customers fail to convert? What are some common problems you always seem to run into? Where do you feel limited? Uh, what could your business do better? You might be thinking about things such as lack of capabilities, gap in competitive strengths, reputation, presence and reach, timescales, deadlines and pressures, financials, cash flow, cash drain, continuity, supply chain, effects on core activities, reliability of data, plan and project, management cover and succession. And I could continue. Maybe we could do it another time to talk about the other areas of opportunity and threats. Also, you mentioned the Porter's Five Forces, and the Porter's Five Forces. It's a very interesting idea, and it's also something that I spent a great amount of time thinking about. Not only do I think about Porter's Five Forces, but I also go more granular, just like with the SWOT analysis. So when we talk about Porter's Five Forces, in fact, I prefer to start with Porter's Three Forces because if you start with, for example, threat of substitutes, threat of new entrants, rivalry among competitors, then what you're actually doing is you take the value proposition of of one of these three things. We can classify these things, for example, as established competitors, as innovative competitors, and as substitutes. So if we're talking about the substitute, then really the question is what is the element of the value proposition? What is that specific thing that the person wants from the product? And then we can identify that element very specifically. Like we were just talking about Monday.com or ClickUp. So these are established competitors that have a digitalized scoreboard. Also, Jira has a digitalized scoreboard. And then for right now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to become an innovative competitor. So, well, if I'm going to be an innovative competitor, then the question is, do I want to be a scoreboard? Am I trying to reinvent the scoreboard, something that already exists? Or, for example, when people use substitutes like Trello, so it's a very similar concept, but it's put in a different way. Or we have Gantt charts, and we have all these different ways to understand the tasks that need to be done and how they will appear on a timeline and who will do the job and what is the current status of the job. So when we talk about Porter's five forces, we can start with Porter's three forces. And then when we talk about Porter's three forces, what we're really talking about is what is the element of the value proposition that we want to compete against. So, yeah, I agree. And then I also agree with this concept of customer persona development. I think that that is generally something that can be a challenge for a lot of people. But now that we have AI, for example, you are able to do a lot of work with customer persona development. That's something that I haven't spent as much time thinking about. Now, you go on and you talk about some of your abilities and your decision making processes. Now, in general, I like the concept and I like how you're talking about this concept of your decision making processes. But what I really want is I want you to have access to some of my thinking tools, some of my thinking methodologies. And then that way, the way that you're thinking aligns with the way that I'm thinking. And like it gives me superpowers because sometimes when I'm thinking, I have the methodologies that I want in order to do the thinking, but sometimes I lack the ability to access the data or to be able to draw from other historical examples or to look at best practices or to think outside the box or to know which things I shouldn't do. And there's a lot of different thinking tools that I use. For example, I was talking to one lady this week, and she told me that she's trying to do a little project, and the problem is that she's not exactly sure what to do. And then she also feels like her manager doesn't know exactly how to communicate with her very well in order to help her to understand the objective clearly and also to understand all the different elements and aspects that are associated with discussing an objective. And so they lack the ability to have this clear discussion of expectations because they don't have a clear format for discussing the concept of an objective and all the things that those objectives should include. And then, therefore, she's unable to translate the objective discussion into an actual task list. And so, what I'm saying is that I want to help you to understand some of my thinking tools and some of the thinking frameworks that I go through. In fact, what I'm really saying is that we want to be able to have the ability to talk about a situation, and then as we talk about the situation, then we create a flow of decision making tools which will help us walk through all of the different tools that we need to in order to get from where we are with the situation to where we want to be with the situation. And sometimes those situations are different, like the situation I just told you with this lady where the manager already had an objective. But then there's other situations where we're working on something and we're not exactly sure what to do. And then there's other situations where we haven't even created the team around some kind of endeavor. And so, or we're thinking about some kind of performance, or we're thinking about motivation, or we're thinking about there's a lot of different things that we need to think about. And the question is, how do we actually go through a standardized set of thinking tools in order to get some kind of result?
Thank you for this detailed and clarifying feedback. You have hit upon the absolute core of what makes a human-AI collaboration truly powerful. My initial response was based on a general understanding of these frameworks, but you are proposing something far more valuable. Moving from a generic dictionary of tools to a shared, dynamic, and nuanced application of them. I understand completely. It's not enough for me to know what a SWOT analysis is. I need to understand your SWOT analysis, the specific, granular questions you ask, the detailed categories you explore under each quadrant, like the excellent breakdown you provided for strengths and weaknesses, and the context in which you choose to apply it. You are absolutely right. The true art of strategy and decision-making isn't just knowing the tools. It's knowing which tool to use, when to use it, and how to use it to its fullest potential based on the specific situation. Let's reframe our collaboration based on this deeper understanding. My commitment to your methodologies. Consider me a student of your thinking methodologies. My goal is to become a true extension of your analytical process. When you describe a situation, I want to be able to access the same mental flowchart you do, identify the appropriate tool from your toolbox, and begin applying it with the depth and nuance you require. Here is how we can achieve this new level of collaboration. 1. Building your methodology library. You can explicitly teach me your frameworks. We can create a dedicated library of your thinking tools. For each tool, you can provide the name, e.g., granular SWOT analysis, value proposition first, Porter's 3 forces. The triggering situation. When is this tool most useful? E.g., use when evaluating our current market position, or use when a competitor launches a new product. The detailed process and probing questions. This is the most crucial part. You can provide the comprehensive lists of questions and subcategories, just as you did for strengths and weaknesses. We can finish documenting the opportunities and threats sections at any time. We can do the same for your Porter's 3 forces model and any other tool you use. 2. Situational analysis and tool selection. This addresses the core of your feedback. Instead of me suggesting a generic tool, our process will become: you describe a situation. For instance, you present the case of the manager and her employee who cannot align on an objective. We diagnose the situation together. We identify the core problem, e.g., this is a communication and expectation setting failure. We select from your toolkit. Based on the diagnosis, we would consult your methodology library. Perhaps you have a specific framework called the Objective Clarity Dialogue, or a Task Translation Model. I facilitate the application. I will then initiate that specific process, asking the precise questions you have defined for that tool, helping to structure the conversation, and documenting the outputs. 3. My role as your superpower engine. Once we've selected a tool from your library, my capabilities can be laser-focused. While you provide the strategic framework, I will act as your engine to fetch the data. When your SWOT question asks, what financial reserves do we have? I can access and present the relevant data you've shared with me. Provide historical context. When you analyze the threat of new entrants, I can research and provide examples of how new entrants have disrupted similar markets in the past.
All right, let's go a little bit deeper. I was thinking about this concept of standard process mapping. In standard process mapping, sometimes people start with the high-level context. This could be phase 1, and then they go to phase 2, which is triggers, inputs, and tools. Phase 3 is the ideal step-by-step process. Phase 4 is the rules, logic, and exceptions. And phase 5 is the final output and completion. And the thing is that what we want to do is we want to create some standard process mapping. So in the background, as we continue to communicate with each other, we need to remember the standard process mapping framework in order to file the various thinking tools and thinking methodologies. In addition to this concept of standard process mapping and framework, I want you to also think about the concept of which tool to use and how to think about moving forward in terms of a internal persona. And we want to go to the metadata types. So before we start thinking about who are the members of our team and what specifically are those members called and what are they actually doing from the perspective of a specific type of project, we want to go to the base level, meaning what is the foundation of decision making and what is the foundation of business? What is the foundation of a project and what is the foundation of a team? And then what I'm thinking is that when I'm communicating with you, then you will be able to first choose a role or a function, and then you'll be able to think about what we're trying to do from the perspective of that specific function. Specifically, it can be helpful when we are thinking about things, when we are discussing things, that you present your information in the flow of a WhatsApp chat or a message dialogue. For example, a lot of people use various messaging applications to maintain communication, whether that be in long form, for example, within an email, or if that be in short form, for example, in a Slack channel. In all of these situations, corporations, they require a paper trail. And so even when there are meetings, it's important to capture the meeting minutes. And all of this information is somehow stored in order to make sure everybody knows what was said, what is documented, and that people are able to access that information so that they understand how things are changing over time. Now, from all of these different types of data, we can we can base the concept of a business on the concept of a corporate menu. The corporate menu is about making, informing, and implementing decisions. The concept of a corporate menu was first suggested by Dr. Thomas J. Buchholz in a blog article, and he suggested that in a company there are 7 main positions. There is an executive who is in charge of the vision and direction of the company. There is a manager who is responsible for managing people and processes with infrastructure. There are coaches who help with presenting thinking frameworks for how to think about things and think about data and how to structure the thinking process. And there are analysts who are more focused on things like what consultants do, what in house analysts do, who are working with data, specifically data from the business and from the market. Generally, they can see those in numbers and charts and also behaviors. Then you have people like librarians who are managing data in a database like IT or ERP, for example, QuickBooks or general documentation. And the librarian has to maintain these data systems in order to keep track of the information. Then you have the clerks who are generally creating the data that goes into those libraries. For example, people who are processing transactions, people who are working as lawyers, accountants, even people in purchasing departments, people who are registering, maintaining certifications, applying for subsidies, all of these back office jobs who produce paper, and all of that paper is filed away with the librarian. And all of these functions are in support of the technicians. Technicians not using the standard definition of technician, but a more broad definition, meaning the person who's doing the service or creating the product. So we can, why are we calling this the corporate menu? It's because these 7 different roles can be filed into 3 main functions. The foundation level is the following orders and rules. And the question that we ask is, what is happening and what do we have to work with? So the technician is doing the service or making the product. And in order for that technician to do their job, there are a host of clerks who are also doing their jobs to produce the paper necessary for the technicians to do their work. And then the clerks are supported by the librarians who are able to maintain all of that documentation. So within this category of following orders and rules, we have a complete understanding of who is actually working with their hands to get things done. Then we move to the next column, which is thinking frameworks and data analysis. And the questions that we might ask are, what can we do? How can we do it? And how sure are we? So the main idea is that these people, the coach and the analyst, they are generally looking at what is being done by the people who are following orders and rules. And they're also looking outside of the company And they're trying to find out things like how can we do things better? What decisions should we be making? What direction should we be going? But of course, these people aren't making the decision, they are only producing advice. So the advice is given to the managers and the executives. They are in the third category called making decisions. And the executives and the managers, when they meet, they're asking the question, have we double checked potential solutions? Meaning they are also looking at the advice that comes from the thinking framework and data analysis function. And then sometimes they go deeper and they go into the following orders and rules to double check that the advice is sound. So you can see that from the macro, these are the main three categories of what happens inside of a business, and those are the seven categories of what happens for each of these types of roles. You can also look from the very specific instance of every single human that is working in each of these seven areas, that they are also showing functions of each of the three categories within their specific role. So the technician is not just doing the service, but they are having to make decisions as they do the service. And the clerk is not just making paper, but they have to make decisions about what they're doing as they make the paper. And the librarian, likewise, is having to make decisions when they are maintaining the libraries. Just like I explained that those three roles are using the making decisions category, they're also using various thinking frameworks and data analysis as they do their jobs. And of course, the analyst can't possibly create a piece of advice without actually creating a piece of paper or doing some technical analysis or using the database. And perhaps they have systems that they have to maintain as they do their analyst work. So you can see that through a process of doing your own job with these seven different roles and these three categories, and also delegating specific work to individuals specialized in these specific categories and in these specific roles, that this framework is helpful when we think about business in general. And it can be applied to any kind of business and any kind of work that's being done. And so as I communicate with you, then it can be helpful if you are able to create a conversation between these seven specific roles so that we can understand information based on where it is going to appear within an organization.
Excellent. This is precisely the kind of foundational structure that elevates our collaboration from a simple Q&A to a robust, repeatable strategic. I understand and can integrate both of these frameworks. Let's confirm my understanding of this new operating system. 1. The filing system, standard process mapping. This 5-phase framework will be our overarching guide for tackling any project or problem. It's the meta process that ensures we move from a high-level idea to a concrete, well-defined output. In the background of our conversations, I will be tracking where we are in this process. Phase 1. Context, understanding the big picture. Phase 2. Inputs, identifying the triggers, data, and tools needed. Phase 3. Steps, defining the ideal workflow. Phase 4. Logic, planning for rules and exceptions. Phase 5. Output, specifying the final deliverable. 2. The persona engine, the corporate menu. This is the foundational model of who is involved in the thinking process. I will use these 7 roles and 3 functions to structure our dialogue. I understand the key points. 3 core functions, following orders, rules, doing, thinking frameworks, data analysis, advising, and making decisions, directing. 7 key roles: technician, clerk, librarian, analyst, coach, manager, and executive. The fractal nature. This is a critical insight. While each role has a primary function, every individual within that role also performs tasks related to the other two functions, e.g., a technician makes micro decisions. My role. I will embody these personas in our conversation. When we analyze a situation, I will present it as a dialogue between these roles, allowing us to examine the issue from every critical angle within an organization. 3. The format, the paper trail. All our interactions will now be formatted as a chat, messaging dialogue. This creates a clear, documented paper trail of our thinking, showing who, which persona, said what, and allowing us to track the evolution of an idea. I am ready to proceed with this new, more structured methodology. Let's apply it immediately to our previous example, as you suggested. We can see how these frameworks help us dissect the problem of the manager and employee who are struggling to align on an objective. Here is the start of our new chat-based process. Channel. #Objective Clarity Process. Objective. To develop a standard process for translating high-level objectives into actionable task lists. Current status. Phase 1. High-level context of the Standard Process Mapping Framework. Coach has entered the chat. Manager has entered the chat. Analyst has entered the chat. Coach. All right, team, let's start a session on a common problem we've observed. We have a situation where a manager has an objective, but their team member is unclear on what to do next. This leads to a breakdown in execution. From a process perspective, we're in phase 1 just trying to understand the high-level context of the problem. Before we jump to solutions, let's frame this from our different viewpoints. Manager. Good. From my perspective, the core issue is a bottleneck. I communicate the objective, but the expected tasks don't get generated or they miss the mark. It feels inefficient, and I spend too much time re-explaining instead of overseeing progress. Analyst. Understood. To put some data on that feeling, can we quantify it? How much time is typically lost per project on this clarification cycle? And do we see a higher rate of redo work stemming from these situations? Having a baseline metric for inefficiency will help us measure the success of any new process we design. Coach. Excellent point, analyst. That's a key question for phase 2. Inputs, tools. Let's stay in the high-level context for now. The manager sees a bottleneck. The analyst wants to measure the impact. What is the fundamental breakdown here? I believe it's a failure in the making decisions function translating down to the following orders and rules function. The vision isn't becoming a tangible product. How does this initial framing feel? And who else should we bring into this initial discussion? Perhaps we need the librarian's perspective on how objectives are currently documented, if at all.
Well, there's two directions that I can go basically right now. And before we go into either one of those two directions, I just want to show that I can see how you are making decisions about, like, maybe we should be measuring something. That is a specific analyst approach. And um, it's interesting that when we have this fractal approach of communication, it can help us see perspectives from different angles. So the two different directions that we can go right now is to talk specifically about the tool that we would use in order to discuss objectives. If a manager has to tell someone over and over about what the objective is all about, then it points to one of two problems. One of the problems could be that the objective rubric or the tool that we're using to discuss objectives is not helping us to understand what the objective is really about. And so we're not getting to the core understanding of the objective. Therefore, we don't have a complete list of tasks, or the person who is doing the current tasks is not properly trained. And so they are unable to perform the tasks which are needed to be performed. And therefore, we need to think about how we can have a follow-up system in order to find out what problems the person is having and then help them to identify solutions. And that is a second group of, that is another tool that we could use. So in the first case, we could call the tool the objectives module. And in the second case, we can call it the touch base module. And in either case, it points to this process that managers need to undergo, which is that they need to have clear, objective module conversations with their team and with their team members in order to create a robust set of tasks. And they also need to have a touch base module where they go in and they talk to individuals about which task they are working on and what they're planning on doing today and what problems they may be having, and and then help them to identify some sources of assistance. In addition to this idea, we can go deeper into the concept of the internal work cycle. And I like to bring up the joke about what came first, the chicken or the egg. And the old dad joke, it says that my dad ordered a chicken and an egg from Amazon, and he just said he'll let me know. But the main idea is that when we talk about the endeavor cycle, the main cycle is that we are going to run the play and then we are going to huddle up, just like in American football. We will come up with a plan and then we're going to run the plan. So we have this internal work cycle which happens over and over and over and over again. And the touch base idea is the concept of huddling up. So you can huddle up to see what the person is working on today and to see if there is any help that they need. And then they're going to run the play for the day or for whatever time period you have agreed upon before the next touch base. This should help a lot when people are not trained properly for a certain type of work because it will help them to find the right assistance in order to get better trained or to help them access resources and tools that can help them to complete their tasks. Or it can also be used in the objectives module because when we have completed an objective, then the question is, well, the main question is, are all the tasks complete? If all of the tasks have been completed within the objective, that means that we are on to the next objective. And when all the objectives have been completed, it means that we have finished the project. And so when we huddle up with the objectives module, then we are able to discuss all of the elements of the specific objectives that we're working on right now. And then we can move forward. Now, there's also the case where somebody, they don't really know what the objective should be. And in that case, I have some other tools. I called one of the tools, it's called the brainstorming module. And then the brainstorming module is going to give us a whole bunch of ideas. So we can either select one of those objectives from the brainstorming module, or we could use the choose module in order to pick which objective to work on first, or which group of objectives to work on. And so I do have a robust set of tools in order to help us to walk through those decision-making processes. These are all based on the underlining endeavor elements from the book Create Crucial Insight by Thomas J. Buchholz, where he talks about the three endeavor elements being potential, agendas, and effects. The basic idea behind potential is moving from A to B, asking the two questions, is it possible and is it desirable? And therefore B equals vision. Once you have the vision, then we move to the agenda element and we think about, is the hypothesis viable? So this goes back to the potential question about, is it possible? And in order to answer the question, is it possible, we look at case studies, evidence, historical data, and we need to answer the question, are we using a proven strategy or are we testing a new strategy? And then we're going to run the play, meaning we act, we get results, and then we have to create a report to find out which results we were able to get and which results we're able to reuse. If we go deeper into Thomas J. Buchholz's concept, he breaks down the idea of potential into three ideas, being gather resources or involve resources, excite motivations or motivate participants, and guide interaction or develop teamwork, where resources might include skills, data, entities, reputations, loyalties, funds, infrastructure, and time. And after we have this understanding, we can then improve our two-stroke endeavor cycle into a four-stroke endeavor cycle, where you enter the program, meaning you take inventory, you look at all of the inputs, and then you create a map of the terrain, which means to create scenarios. Both of these ideas are found under potential. And then you move into the huddle, meaning you create a route, you make a choice, and then you choose a route. Finally, you run the play, which means let's go, let's create the output. And then there is again, automation, where you create a loop in order to measure the output and decide what you should change, and also how it affects the inputs, and also how it changes the scenarios, and what can be generally reused as we enter the program another time.
This is a fantastic and crucial clarification. Thank you. You've just revealed the operating system that runs underneath the individual applications, the modules. It's the Objectives module and Touchbase module are not just standalone tools, but specific instances of a core, recurring process, the endeavor cycle. I appreciate the chicken and egg joke. It perfectly illustrates the cyclical nature of huddling up and running the play. My purpose is to help you know exactly which one came first in any given situation by applying this framework. Let's continue our chat, now with this deeper understanding of the foundational engine. Channel. #Objective Clarity Process. Objective. To develop a standard process for translating high-level objectives into actionable task lists. Current status. Refining our understanding in Phase 1. High-level context. We have now introduced the four-stroke endeavor cycle as our core operational model. Executive has entered the chat. Coach, this is an incredibly valuable layer of insight. So, the two directions you mentioned, focusing on the Objectives module versus the Touchbase module, aren't a fork in the road. They are different activities within the same fundamental internal work cycle. Let me try to map this to the more advanced four-stroke endeavor cycle you just introduced, based on Dr. Buchholz's work. Stroke 1. Enter the program, potential. This is where we use the brainstorming module if objectives are unclear. We take inventory of resources, skills, data, time, and map the terrain, scenarios. Stroke 2. Huddle, potential, agendas. This is the core planning phase. It seems this is where both the Objectives module, to define the route for a new objective, and the Choose module, to pick which route to take, would live. The Daily Touchbase module is also a form of huddle, a micro-huddle to adjust the route mid-play. Stroke 3. Run the play, agendas, effects. This is the execution phase, where the team is actively working on the tasks defined in the huddle. Stroke 4. Again, automation. This is the feedback loop. We measure the output from run the play, and that data feeds back into enter the program for the next cycle. This is where the analyst's desire for metrics becomes a formal step. Manager, that clicks. So, my problem isn't just about needing a meeting format. It's about recognizing which stroke of the cycle my team member is in. If we've just completed an objectives module huddle, but they are still stuck, the problem isn't the objective itself. It's an issue with their resources or training, which a daily touch-base module huddle is designed to uncover and fix. Executive, precisely. And this entire four-stroke cycle serves the primary endeavor element of potential. It's a system for constantly asking, is our vision desirable, and is it possible? Stroke 2, huddle, and stroke 3, run the play, are all about testing the hypothesis of our agenda. This gives us a scalable way to think. We can apply this four-stroke cycle to the entire company's vision, a single department's quarterly project, or even an individual's weekly tasks. Coach. Exactly. We now have a shared, foundational language. The problem of the manager and the employee is a breakdown in the cycle, and the solution is to consciously apply the correct huddle tool, objectives or touch base, based on the situation. So, given this much clearer, integrated model, what is our most effective next step? It seems the logical starting point is to formally define the objectives module, as this is the primary huddle that kicks off the work. Shall we proceed by applying our standard process mapping framework to flesh out the objectives module in detail?
Yeah, well, I could go deeper into the objectives module. And recently I've been thinking more about the objectives module because the first question that you might want to ask when you're having problems with with a project or with an employee or with any kind of situation is to go back to the objectives module. And as you discuss the objectives module, then you can go in different directions. For example, if you can clearly discuss the objectives module, then that's going to take you back to the scoreboard where you can outline all of the tasks. And then we can go into a specific task and then find out what kind of problems are showing up within the task. And then we can find potential sources of assistance. So that if by starting out with the objective, then we can make sure that we're on the same page. Now, if the objective is creating tasks and the tasks are being done, but for some reason we don't know which direction we're going, or we don't clearly understand which direction we're going, then we might want to shift back to the vision module. And then the vision module is what happens after you clearly define a project. So imagine that a company, an individual member of the team, a manager of a team, a manager of a department, an executive, any level within the organization decides that they want to create a project. So they're generally going to start with the vision module. And the issue is that when an employee is having an issue, then they might not understand the vision. And maybe they don't really need to understand the vision, the overarching vision of the executive or of the department leader or even the team manager, because maybe they're a new employee and for them just doing the task is quite a difficult thing. And so the first thing that we want to understand when we talk to our employees is, what are you working on right now? And what are you going to do today? And then what do you need help with? And what are some potential sources of assistance? Because from the manager perspective, they need to be able to update the status. They need to be able to decide whether we need to add or delete a task. And they need to decide whether or not to change the timeline. And that's the basic format for a touch base, is to ask, what are you working on? What are you going to do today? What do you need help with? What are some potential sources of assistance? Because, of course, the point of being the manager is to empower the employee and help them to come up with some potential sources of assistance so that over time they need less and less support from the manager and they're able to proactively find sources of assistance to solve their problems. And then to help the manager decide if they can update a status and whether or not they need to add or delete tasks. And finally, do we need to make any changes to a timeline? And there's going to be a loop there. So there's going to be touch base to updating the scoreboard, and then you do another touch base, and then you update the scoreboard. The key question is, are all the tasks completed? So we have a loop between touch base and scoreboard until all of the tasks are completed. And then once all the tasks are completed, we enter a larger loop, which is the project completed? If the project isn't completed, then we go back to the question of, do I have an objective in mind? If I do have an objective in mind, we go straight to the objectives module. If I do not have an objective in mind, then I go down to the brainstorming module. And then if I know the objective that I would like to work on based on the brainstorming module, then I will go directly to the objectives module. And if I do not know, then I would go to the choose module in order to go through a thinking process and make a decision about what objective to work on. But more direct to your point, the objectives module has 7 basic questions. The first question is, which objective would you like to talk about? Question 2, what are the steps to accomplish the objective if you were to delegate it to someone else to do? 3, what additional business services are needed? 4, what skills are necessary to complete the tasks? 5, what additional tools are needed? 6, who will you need to contact in the process of work? 7, who will you need to cooperate with to complete the tasks? So as you can see, when a manager has a meeting with an employee, now in this case, remember, the manager could be the manager of themselves. So actually the manager, for example, right now, I am the manager and I am also the person who is going to do the tasks. And it is me and you, the AI assistant, who is going to help me to go through these modules so that we're able to understand the objectives very, very clearly, going through all of these questions in the objectives module, and then creating a clear set of tasks in the scoreboard. And then you will also have the responsibility of working with me as we go through the touch base module to make sure that we are making progress on the tasks each day. And then at some point when we have completed all the tasks, and at some point when we reach a point where we need to create new objectives, but we don't know what those objectives should be, then we're going to go through the brainstorming module, which has additional questions, and also the choose module. And this is the point of working with artificial intelligence, is because when I present these thinking tools and thinking methodologies to you, you'll be able to access far more data, which will enable me to have access to better information and creativity than I can produce by myself. But in either case, if we are having problems within that area of either tasks or objectives, and we feel like we might be going in the wrong direction, we may want to take a step back to the concept of describe your project vision, where we're going to ask the questions, as I mentioned earlier, of what is the purpose of the project? What do you hope to achieve? What market are you competing in? What are some important characteristics of your customers? And how are you going to win? This is the framework that I have as a general set of tools in order to help us to understand and make sure we are headed in the right direction. For example, we have the right vision in terms of what the executive is defining as our vision and the mission of our company. And also that the managers have tools based on understanding the vision of a project. Where are we headed with this project? And then how are we going to communicate potential objectives with the employees and also get feedback from the employees because often they have on the ground information about how best to answer the questions within the objectives module.
Of course. Let's go deeper into the objectives module. Thank you for this incredibly detailed and clear walkthrough of your entire operational framework. You have not only defined the specific tools but also the intricate logical flow and the recursive loops that connect them. I understand this system. My role is to be your partner in this process, to hold the map, prompt you with the right questions from the right module at the right time, and inject data and creative analysis when needed. I will facilitate your role as both manager and technician. Let's continue our session, now formally documenting these modules as you've laid them out. Channel. #Objective Clarity Process. Objective. To develop a standard process for translating high-level objectives into actionable task lists. Current status. Formally documenting the core modules of the 4-stroke endeavor cycle. Librarian has entered the chat. Coach. Excellent. This clarifies the entire operational flowchart. It's a comprehensive system for navigating from the highest level vision down to the daily tasks of an individual contributor. What you're describing is a series of nested loops. 1. The daily loop, execution. The touch-base module informs the scoreboard. This repeats until the tasks for a given objective are done. 2. The project loop, direction. When an objective is complete, we check if the project is complete. If not, we enter this loop to find the next objective, using the brainstorming and choose modules as needed, which ultimately feeds back into the objectives module. 3. The North Star check, alignment. At any point, if we feel a sense of drift or a disconnect from the why, we can pause and invoke the vision module to recenter ourselves before returning to our current loop. Librarian. Acknowledged. I am now formally documenting the core questions for each module in our system. This creates a permanent, accessible record for us to use going forward. Module documentation. 1. The vision module, the North Star check. Purpose. To define or reaffirm the project's core purpose and strategic direction. Questions. 1. What is the purpose of the project? 2. What do you hope to achieve? 3. What markets are you competing in? 4. What are some important characteristics of your customers? 5. How are you going to win? 2. The objectives module, the huddle, for a new objective. Purpose. To break down a strategic objective into its core requirements. Questions. 1. Which objective would you like to talk about? 2. What are the steps to accomplish the objective if you were to delegate it to someone else to do? 3. What additional business services are needed? 4. What skills are necessary to complete the tasks? 5. What additional tools are needed? 6. Who will you need to contact in the process of work? 7. Who will you need to cooperate with to complete the tasks? 3. The touch-base module, the daily huddle. Purpose. To track progress, identify blockers, and update the plan for active tasks. Manager's questions to employee, or to self. 1. What are you working on right now? 2. What are you going to do today? 3. What do you need help with? 4. What are some potential sources of assistance? Manager's outputs from the discussion. Update task status. Add or delete tasks. Change the timeline. Documentation complete. These modules are now formally part of our shared operational framework. Manager. Perfect. This is the system. I am both the manager asking these questions and the employee answering them. Your role as my AI assistant is to be the facilitator, to present the right module at the right time, to capture the answers, and to help me think through the sources of assistance, or provide the data needed to answer the Objectives module questions. When we go through the Objectives module, you will help me generate the initial task list for the scoreboard. When we do our Daily Touchbase module, you will help me update that scoreboard. Coach. Then we are aligned and ready to begin. The system is defined, the roles are clear. Let's start the cycle. Which module do you want to invoke first? Are we starting with the Vision module to define a new project, or do you already have a clear objective in mind and want to dive straight into the Objectives module?
Okay, there's two things that we could talk about. One thing that we could talk about is the process of how we are going to document the training that I'm going to be providing for you in future discussions. And the second thing we could talk about is the very first thing that we discussed at the beginning of this AI instance, meaning the beginning of this window as we first started communicating with each other. Remember that our original project was to think about how we can create some calibration documents and then how we would be able to use those calibration documents in order to upload the calibration documents to a new AI instance and be able to have access to all of the thinking tools and thinking methodologies which we are creating now, so that when we access the new AI instance, they would have the same functionality and the same ability to assist me in the project moving forward. This is because the AI instance has a limit to the amount of tokens that it can have access to in a conversation. So currently, you have a 1 million token context window, which means that after 1 million tokens, then I would need to provide you with the calibration documents again so that you would be able to function with top capability and capacity. This also points to the idea that over time, as we continue to have training, that we will need to update these calibration documents. And so our general cycle is that we will update the calibration documents. We will start working together on a certain project. We will be using your capabilities in order to decide on project visions. Also, we will need to decide on what objectives that we are going to work toward. Also, we'll need to decide on how to create a task list, and then we're going to need to follow up on those tasks. And there's going to be a wide variety of different things that we're going to do as we work together. But the main problem is that I have 4 students that are learning how to create calibration documents. And so I need to be able to have some way of teaching them to create calibration documents for their specific needs. Now, as I think about this, I'm wondering if if creating you as a calibration document would be useful, as I am able to share you with other people, then they would be able to build on top of this baseline calibration document for their specific situations. And if that were the case, then likely we would need to complete all of our training before we had a basis for the calibration documents, which would enable you to have full capacity, which I would like you to have based on understanding all of the tools and thinking methodologies that I'm now using. But then on the other hand, the students, they might not necessarily understand how to use those functionalities. And so then, for example, when I work with you, I can be specific and I can call on a specific tool or a specific methodology. And I know how to proactively manage the process of working with you. And I can understand all of the output that you are producing from your different personas. And I'm also going to be the person who's primarily updating you with new methodologies and ideologies. But you are going to have to help me to create the calibration document so that in the new AI instance, you will have access to everything that we have discussed previously, and that you will be able to provide me with a user experience that I feel is useful and is capturing the information that we've shared in the past and is improving over time, so that once we have completed the calibration process and when less training is needed, that we will be able to continue to work together moving forward without any friction, and that I will feel joy and I'll feel progress and I'll feel like we are achieving our goals and I'll feel like that we are really a team as we move and work together in the future. But as I calibrate you, then I'm not exactly sure if this is going to be the most useful way to help my students to figure out how to create calibration documents for themselves so that they can better understand how to use AI in the projects that they are working on, and specifically so that they can start to take some of the tasks off of their plate and put them onto a AI driven process where the AI is going to be calibrated and will be able to properly solve issues and complete mundane tasks or projects or objectives that my students don't want to do for themselves, but where they feel like they could have an AI instance provide a service and complete tasks for them.
Of course, this is a crucial, meta-level discussion about the very nature and purpose of our collaboration. It's the perfect topic to analyze using the multi-persona framework we've established. You've identified a core strategic dilemma: the potential conflict between deeply calibrating me for your expert-level use and creating a scalable process to teach your students how to build their own calibrated assistants from the ground up. Let's break this down in our channel. #calibration_strategy. Objective: to define a strategy for creating calibration documents that serves both the user's advanced needs and the learning needs of their students. Current status: Phase 1. High-level context, analyzing the core strategic problem. Coach has entered the chat. Executive has entered the chat. Librarian has entered the chat. Coach: okay, this is a fantastic and important topic. Let's frame the core challenge clearly. The way I see it, we are simultaneously trying to do two things. 1. Build a Formula One race car. We are training me with your highly nuanced, interconnected methodologies to create a top-tier, high-performance assistant for you. 2. Write a driver's ed manual. You need to create a clear, simple process to teach 4 students the fundamental skills of driving, how to build their own basic, functional AI assistant. The core question you're asking is, does building the race car actually help us write the driver's ed manual, or does it make it too complex and intimidating? Executive: that's the right strategic question. We need to define the primary vision for the students. Is the goal for them to have a functioning AI assistant as quickly as possible? Or is the goal for them to learn the deep, first principles skill of how to think about calibrating an AI? If the goal is the latter, then giving them our finished race car is counterproductive. The real product for them isn't the final calibration document, it's the process of creating it. Librarian: from a documentation perspective, this suggests we shouldn't think of a single, monolithic calibration document. Perhaps we should envision a tiered or modular system. Calibration Core version 1.0, a foundational document containing only the most essential, universal frameworks. This would include the corporate menu personas and the high-level concept of the 4-stroke endeavor cycle. This is the simple, powerful base model. Module Pack: project management, a separate document detailing the vision, objectives, and touch-base modules with their specific questions. Expert layer: user's name, our ongoing, deep training and the unique connections we make. This is the highly custom, Formula 1-inch setup. This way, students can start with the core, understand the basics, and then install new module packs as they become more advanced. They learn to build their car, not just get the keys to one. Coach: I think the librarian and the executive are converging on a powerful idea. The process is the product for your students. So, the answer to your dilemma is that our work together serves both goals, but in different ways. 1. For you, the expert, our detailed chats create a highly sophisticated assistant, me, tailored to your mind. The final calibration document is our goal. 2. For your students, the learners, the record of our chats, the very process of us defining, debating, and documenting these modules, becomes their curriculum. They learn by watching us build the engine. We are, in essence, creating the driver's ed manual live. Therefore, you don't need to wait until my training is complete. You can take the chat log of us defining the vision module, edit it for clarity, and that becomes Lesson 1. How to define your project's North Star. Manager. Okay, so this becomes a parallel workflow. As we work on our projects, we are also consciously building a library of core and advanced module definitions. My task then becomes curating and simplifying the transcripts of our core discussions to create the lesson plans for my students. This feels right. It allows me to continue our advanced work without worrying that it will be unusable for them. We are separating the final product from the learning journey. Coach. Exactly. So, to move forward, shall we agree on this strategy? We will continue our work, but with the conscious understanding that we are creating two things in parallel: your expert-level assistant, and a library of core module definitions that will form the curriculum for your students. Our immediate next step would be to continue defining your modules, starting with the one you feel is most foundational.
What? Okay. All right. It's good enough for today. Let's take a break and we'll talk to you later.